Ever wonder why some cartoons vanished after just one season? The 1960s was television's Wild West, when animators experimented with concepts so bizarre they'd never get greenlit today. While Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse live on, these forgotten gems crashed and burned after just 13 episodes. Ready to discover the weirdest, wildest cartoon failures that almost changed animation forever? Let's dive into the strange world of 1960s one-season wonders. Space Ghost, 1966. Picture this, a superhero patrolling space in a white suit with the power to turn invisible and shoot energy beams from his wrists. Space Ghost wasn't just another cartoon, it was a revolution in design and animation. Created by legendary artist Alex Toth, this cosmic crusader fought intergalactic villains with his sidekicks Jan, Jace, and their pet monkey Blip. What made Space Ghost truly ahead of its time was its sophisticated art style and atmospheric music. The show pioneered limited animation techniques that would influence cartoons for decades. Each frame looked like a comic book come to life with bold shadows and dramatic compositions that made other cartoons look like child's play. CBS executives initially loved Space Ghost, but panicked when parents complained it was too intense for Saturday mornings. The villains, especially the insect-like Zorak, gave kids nightmares. One mother in Ohio wrote, "My son hasn't slept properly since seeing that giant mantis creature." The show disappeared after just 20 episodes, only to be reborn in the 1990s as the surreal talk show Space Ghost Coast to Coast on Adult Swim. Talk about a comeback. Which Space Ghost villain freaked you out the most? The Herculoids, 1967. Imagine crash landing on a distant planet ruled by a family with pet monsters. The Herculoids was pure sci-fi madness following Xandor, his wife Tara, and their son Dorno as they defended their primitive world from advanced alien invaders with the help of their bizarre creature companions. These weren't your typical sidekicks. Gloop and Gleep were protoplasmic blobs that could shapeshift and duplicate themselves. Egu was a giant rock ape with super strength. Tundro shot explosive energy rocks from his horn, while Zoc, a flying dragon, shot laser beams from his eyes and tail. Kids went absolutely wild trying to recreate these creatures with their toys. Network executives at CBS couldn't figure out whether the show was targeting kids or adults. Animation historian Jerry Beck called it the most visually ambitious Hanna-Barbera series ever created, but sponsors worried about the show's strange violence. When a creature named Egu literally crushed alien invaders under boulders in one episode, concerned parents flooded the network with complaints. Though it vanished after one season, the Herculoids maintained such a cult following that Adult Swim referenced it decades later. Who needs dialogue when you have a rock monster smashing aliens? The Galaxy Trio, 1967. What happens when you combine superheroes, space exploration, and 1960s fashion? You get the Galaxy Trio, a show about three space patrol officers with extraordinary powers who protected the galaxy from cosmic threats. Vapor Man could transform into gas, Gravity Girl controlled gravitational forces, and Meteor Man possessed super strength and heat powers. The Galaxy Trio pushed boundaries with its diverse cast. Gravity Girl was one of the first female superheroes to co-lead a cartoon series. Their patrol ship, Condor 1, became one of the most recognizable spacecraft designs of the era, inspiring everything from Star Trek models to actual NASA concept vehicles. Behind the scenes, the show was plagued with production issues. Voice actor Don Messick, who played Vapor Man, once revealed, "We recorded most episodes in a single rushed session. Sometimes I didn't even see the script until I walked into the booth." The animation studio frequently recycled footage to meet deadlines, with some chase sequences appearing in 5 different episodes. While initially popular, the show was abruptly canceled when its companion segment, Birdman, received higher ratings. The Galaxy Trio was relegated to TV history, though their legacy lives on in the design of countless future space heroes. Ever notice how many modern superheroes still use their power combination? The Abbott and Costello Cartoon Show, 1967. Believe it or not, legendary comedy duo Abbott and Costello once starred in their own animated series that crashed and burned after just 39 episodes. This cartoon attempted to translate their classic vaudeville routines into animated form, with Lou's slapstick antics and Bud's straight man reactions reimagined for a new generation. The most fascinating aspect was how the show tried to recreate their iconic "Who's on First" routine across multiple episodes with different animated scenarios. One version had them as astronauts confused about moon crater names, another as fishermen mixing up boat names. Kids who'd never seen the original comedy team were introduced to their timeless humor through these wild adaptations. Production was rushed to capitalize on renewed interest in the duo following successful TV reruns of their films. Animation director Phil Monroe later admitted, "We were basically drawing on autopilot, trying to meet impossible deadlines." The show used such limited animation that sometimes only Abbott's mouth would move for entire 30-second stretches. Critics absolutely demolished the show. TV Guide called it a sad caricature of once great comedians, while the New York Times declared it the worst possible introduction to classic comedy for children. Despite the criticism, the cartoon introduced Abbott and Costello to a younger audience who would seek out their classic films years later. Would this show survive in today's comedy landscape? Frankenstein Jr. and the Impossibles, 1966. Talk about a wild concept mashup. Half the show followed Frankenstein Jr., a giant robot created by a boy genius to fight crime. The other half featured The Impossibles, a rock band whose members secretly transformed into superheroes. Fluid Man could turn into water, Multi-Man could duplicate himself, and Coil Man could stretch his body into springs. The show perfectly captured the 1960s obsession with both monsters and rock music. Frankenstein Jr. stood 30 feet tall with incredible strength and gadgets, including I-beams and rocket feet. Meanwhile, the Impossibles performed at concerts only to rush off stage mid-song when their Impossibles alert rings sounded, a concept that kids absolutely loved to reenact in playgrounds across America. Behind the scenes, animation legend Alex Toth hated working on the Impossibles, calling them the worst character designs I've ever been forced to create. Network executives demanded countless revisions, wanting them to appeal to both Beatles fans and superhero enthusiasts. The result was a bizarre hybrid that confused marketing teams but delighted kids. The show was pulled after one season when conservative parent groups complained about the suggestive nature of the rock band segments. One PTA letter claimed, "These guitar-playing heroes encourage rebellion and disrespect for authority." How times change. Today, it's considered one of the most innovative format experiments of 1960s animation. The Adam Ant Secret Squirrel Show, 1965. Imagine an ant with the power of an atomic bomb and a trench coat wearing squirrel spy with a secret agent hat. This absolutely bonkers double-feature cartoon showcased Hanna-Barbera's most bizarre creations. Adam Ant, a super-strong insect who lived in an anthill with a nuclear reactor, and Secret Squirrel, who fought crime with his fez-wearing sidekick Morocco Mole. Adam Ant's catchphrase, "Up and Adam Ant," became a playground staple, while kids obsessively collected the surprisingly popular Secret Squirrel toy line, which sold over 2 million units despite the show's short run. The most outrageous episode featured Adam Ant literally lifting the entire Pentagon building to stop a villain, a scene network censors initially rejected for making light of national security. Production artists revealed they were experimenting with LSD while designing Secret Squirrel's surreal villains, including Yellow Pinky and Sirocco Mole. Animation director Charles A. Nichols later admitted, "We were pushing boundaries with characters that would never get approved today. A super-powered government ant, a squirrel with military secrets, it was madness." TV critics were baffled by the show's popularity. The Los Angeles Times called it a fever dream masquerading as children's entertainment. Yet, it consistently ranked in the top 5 Saturday morning shows during its run. While canceled after one season due to sponsor concerns about violence, both characters returned in later Hanna-Barbera productions. Did your parents ever catch you pretending to be a super spy squirrel? Mr. Terrific, 1967. Not the superhero comic character you might be thinking of. This forgotten gem featured Stanley Beamish, an ordinary gas station attendant who gained superpowers by taking a special power pill that gave him strength and the ability to fly for 1 hour. The catch? The government only gave him enough pills for his specific missions, creating a ticking clock for each adventure. What made Mr. Terrific truly bizarre was how terrible he was at being a superhero. Unlike confident heroes like Superman, Stanley was clumsy, afraid of heights, and constantly bungling his missions before somehow succeeding at the last minute. In one infamous episode, he took his pill but spent 45 minutes trapped in an elevator, leaving him just 15 minutes to save the day. The show faced production disasters from the start. Star Dick Gautier quit after 3 episodes due to dangerous stunts, forcing a mid-season replacement. The special effects team caused an actual fire on set while filming flight scenes, and the network received complaints about the pill-popping main character during the height of anti-drug campaigns. Critics absolutely savaged the show. Variety called it a superhero for people who hate superheroes, while the Chicago Tribune dubbed it the least superhero in television history. Canceled after just 17 episodes, Mr. Terrific has become a cult favorite among bad TV enthusiasts who celebrate its uniquely pathetic protagonist. Ever wonder how a show this ridiculous got greenlit? Marine Boy, 1966. Before SpongeBob made underwater adventures popular, Marine Boy was making waves as one of the first anime series to be broadcast in America. This groundbreaking show followed a young boy who worked for an underwater police force, protecting the ocean with his high-tech gadgets including a propeller belt, electric boomerang, and oxygen gum that allowed him to breathe underwater. The most fascinating aspect was Marine Boy's animal companions, a white dolphin named Splasher, and a mermaid girl called Neptina who could speak with sea creatures. Kids became obsessed with the concept of oxygum, with reports of children actually trying to chew regular gum underwater to see if they could breathe. This led to several pool safety warnings being issued across America. Warner Brothers heavily edited the original Japanese version for American audiences, removing storylines considered too dark for children. The voice recording sessions were so rushed that actors sometimes performed multiple characters in the same scene, leading to bizarre conversations where the hero essentially talked to himself with a slightly different voice. While popular with kids, Marine Boy suffered from competition with live-action shows like Flipper and Sea Hunt. Television critic Alan Sepinwall called it a fascinating cultural bridge between Japanese and American animation styles that arrived decades before its time. The show disappeared after 78 episodes, but is now considered a pioneering effort in bringing anime to Western audiences. Did you ever dream of having your own underwater adventures like Marine Boy? Birdman and the Galaxy Trio, 1967. Before becoming a parody on Adult Swim, Birdman was a deadly serious superhero who gained his powers from the sun. This solar-powered hero could fly, create energy shields, and shoot solar rays from his hands, fighting villains like Reducto and Mordo the Deadly with the help of his eagle sidekick Avenger. The most outrageous element was Birdman's weakness. He literally began to die if kept away from sunlight for too long. This created insane plot scenarios where villains would simply trap him in dark rooms or during eclipses. One episode featured Birdman desperately crawling toward a sunbeam while growing weaker by the second. Nightmare fuel for impressionable kids. Behind the animation stood design legend Alex Toth, who created Birdman's distinctive black and yellow costume. Network executives constantly battled with Toth over the show's violence level. He later revealed in an interview, they wanted a superhero who could beat up bad guys, but never actually hurt anyone. I told them that was ridiculous and walked out of 3 different meetings. Despite solid ratings, the show was canceled when Hanna-Barbera decided to pivot toward gentler, comedy-focused cartoons like Scooby-Doo. Birdman vanished for decades until becoming the star of the surreal adult comedy Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, in the early 2000s. A comeback no one could have predicted. Did you know many of Birdman's original voice recordings were repurposed for his adult comedy version? The new Three Stooges, 1965. Imagine the shock kids felt seeing the actual Three Stooges starring in their own cartoon. This bizarre hybrid series featured live-action segments with the aging comedy legends Moe Howard, Larry Fine, and Curly Joe DeRita, bookending animated adventures where they voiced their cartoon counterparts. The strangest part? The real Stooges were in their 60s during filming, visibly struggling through physical comedy routines they had perfected decades earlier. The contrast between the elderly men in the live segments and their youthful cartoon versions created a viewing experience one critic called televisual whiplash. In one memorable episode, live-action Mo couldn't complete a signature eye poke move, so they awkwardly cut to the cartoon version finishing the gag. Production was plagued with health problems. Larry Fine suffered a stroke during the second season, forcing animators to reduce his character's screen time while he recovered. The animation quality was notoriously cheap, with Cambria Studios using the controversial Synchro-Vox technique where real human mouths were superimposed over cartoon faces, creating a disturbing, uncanny valley effect. While initially successful with 156 episodes produced, the show damaged the Stooges' reputation. Variety wrote, "These new productions only serve to remind viewers how far the once great comedians have fallen." Despite the criticism, the show introduced the Stooges to a new generation of fans who would later discover their classic films. Who knew the last hurrah of these comedy legends would be a bizarre cartoon cash grab? Batfink, 1966. "My wings are like a shield of steel." With that catchphrase, Batfink swooped into American homes as one of the most blatant Batman parodies ever created. This super-powered pink bat fought crime alongside his karate-chopping sidekick Karate, driving around in his Batilac while facing ridiculous villains like Hugo A. Go-Go and Judy Jitsu. The most absurd aspect was how literally the show took Batfink's catchphrase. His steel wings could block absolutely anything. Bullets, missiles, even falling buildings. A power he demonstrated in every single episode, often multiple times. The animators got increasingly creative with the wing gags, once showing them stop a nuclear explosion while Batfink casually checked his watch. Produced on a shoestring budget by Hal Seeger Productions, each episode cost less than $5,000 to make, practically pennies compared to other cartoons. The animation was so limited that characters often moved by simply sliding across the screen without moving their legs. Voice actor Frank Buxton performed both Batfink and the narrator, sometimes having entire conversations with himself. While most Batman parodies disappeared quickly, Batfink developed a surprising international following. British television aired the show for over 30 years, making it more famous in the UK than America. Animation historian Jerry Beck called it the perfect example of how limited animation could succeed through sheer personality and humor rather than technical quality. Did your parents ever confuse this ridiculous character with the actual Batman? The Amazing Chan and the Chan Clan, 1972. Imagine Charlie Chan, the famous detective, reimagined as the head of a crime-solving family band with 10 children who toured the country in a van that transformed into various vehicles. Yes, this actually existed. Each Chan kid had a distinct personality and musical talent, creating a bizarre combination of mystery-solving and pop music performances. The most groundbreaking aspect was that the Chan family featured Asian American protagonists, still rare in 1970s television. The original voice cast included future stars like Jodie Foster and a young J.J. French, who later founded the heavy metal band Twisted Sister. However, network executives got cold feet about authentic accents and replaced most of the Asian voice actors with white performers after just a few episodes. Behind the scenes, the show faced constant rewrites. Original scripts featured legitimate detective work, but executives demanded more Scooby-Doo-style hijinks. The legendary Willie Ito, who helped animate the van transformations, revealed, "We designed 37 different vehicle configurations, but the budget only allowed us to animate 4 of them. The others never made it past the drawing board." Critics were baffled by the show's identity crisis. The New York Times called it a confusing mashup of the Partridge Family and Charlie Chan that succeeds at being neither. Despite the criticism, the show broke ground for Asian representation in animation, paving the way for future diverse cartoons. Cancelled after just 16 episodes, it remains a fascinating cultural artifact of changing attitudes in American animation. The Mighty Heroes, 1966. Created by animation legend Ralph Bakshi, The Mighty Heroes followed the adventures of 5 of the most incompetent superheroes ever conceived: Strongman, Rope Man, Tornado Man, Cuckoo Man, and the Infant Diaper Man. These bumbling do-gooders protected Good Haven City by basically stumbling into victories through sheer luck and chaos. What made this show truly outrageous was how terrible these heroes were at heroism. Most episodes followed the same pattern. Villains attack, the heroes arrive and make everything worse. They accidentally defeat the villain while trying to save themselves. Rope Man would tie himself in knots, Tornado Man would get dizzy and crash into buildings, and Diaper Man would defeat villains by throwing his bottle at them. Bakshi later revealed the show was his rebellion against traditional superhero cartoons. I wanted to create heroes who were as screwed up as real people. CBS executives were concerned about the show's slapstick violence, particularly scenes where the heroes injured themselves more than the villains. One episode was temporarily pulled when Diaper Man's bottle throwing was allegedly imitated by children. Critics initially dismissed the show as juvenile nonsense, but it later gained respect as a pioneering work of superhero satire. Animation historian Jerry Beck called it the first postmodern superhero cartoon, deconstructing the genre decades before that became fashionable. Though it lasted only 20 episodes, the Mighty Heroes influenced generations of comedic superheroes, from The Tick to One Punch Man. Ever wonder where the trend of incompetent superheroes really began? Calvin and the Colonel, 1961. Imagine Amos and Andy, but with animals instead of blackface. That's essentially what Calvin and the Colonel was. A controversial attempt to rebrand the problematic radio show by turning the characters into a fox and a bear. The show followed Colonel Montgomery J. Claxon, a shrewd Southern bear, and Calvin T. Burnside, his fox friend, as they got into various schemes and misadventures. The most shocking aspect was how thinly veiled this rebranding was. The original voice actors from Amos and Andy, Freeman Gosden and Charles Correll, played the animal versions with identical characterizations and accents. The show even recycled entire scripts from the radio program, simply changing human references to animal ones. When civil rights groups protested, producers literally said they can't complain about racism if they're animals. Behind the scenes, network executives at ABC were desperate to capitalize on the popularity of Amos and Andy while avoiding controversy. The animation was rushed and cheaply produced by Cairo Productions, with characters often speaking without their mouths moving to save money. The show cost approximately $65,000 per episode, expensive for the time but cutting corners wherever possible. Civil rights groups saw through the animal disguise immediately. The NAACP called it the same offensive stereotypes in fur and feathers. Despite initial strong ratings, sponsors began pulling out due to the controversy, and the show was canceled after 26 episodes. Television historian Tim Brooks called it one of the most transparent attempts to circumvent changing social standards in broadcasting history. Would you have recognized the problematic origins if you watched as a child? Journey to the Center of the Earth, 1967. Based on Jules Verne's classic novel, this wildly inaccurate adaptation followed Professor Lindenbrook, his niece Cindy, and their guide Lars as they discovered a vast underground world filled with dinosaurs, lost civilizations, and even aliens, none of which appeared in the original book. The most insane deviation was the addition of Cindy's pet duck Gertrude, who wore a bow and quacked advice during dangerous situations. In one infamous episode, Gertrude actually saved everyone from a lava flow by discovering an underwater passage, prompting TV Guide to ask, has a duck ever been the hero in Verne's literary works? Kids loved Gertrude so much that a short-lived toy line was created, though production stopped when the duck figures kept breaking at the neck. The animation studio, Filmation, produced the entire series in just 4 months, resulting in numerous errors. Background artists accidentally drew modern skylines in supposedly prehistoric settings, and in 3 separate episodes, dinosaurs could be seen wearing wristwatches, left over from reused animation cells of human characters. Science educators were outraged by the show's portrayal of geology and paleontology. The American Association of Science Teachers formally complained about an episode where the characters discovered a civilization living inside a giant diamond, calling it criminally misleading to young minds. Despite the criticism, the show developed a cult following among fans of so bad it's good animation. Would modern audiences appreciate this level of scientific absurdity? The Space Kidettes, 1966. Imagine a group of kindergartners in space helmets operating their own orbital clubhouse while being chased by a bumbling space pirate. The Space Kidettes followed 4 children and their dog Pupstar as they protected a treasure map from the villainous Captain Skyhook and his sidekick Static. The most bizarre aspect was how these unsupervised children lived alone in outer space with no adults or explanation of how they got there. Their clubhouse had oxygen somehow. They piloted space vehicles perfectly, and no one ever questioned why elementary-aged kids were living alone in Earth's orbit. One episode featured them casually mentioning they hadn't been to school in months because space is more fun. Production was notoriously troubled. Hanna-Barbera rushed the show to capitalize on the space race excitement, with lead animator Arnold Stang revealing, "We were literally drawing rocket designs based on yesterday's newspaper headlines about NASA." The voice recording sessions often used temporary actors when child performers had school commitments, resulting in characters suddenly sounding completely different mid-episode. Parental groups were concerned about the show's casual approach to child endangerment. The National Parent-Teacher Association called it concerning that children are depicted surviving deadly space conditions with no adult supervision. NASA officials were reportedly annoyed by the scientifically impossible scenarios, particularly an episode where the children rode asteroids like skateboards through the vacuum of space. Despite the criticism, Space Kidettes merchandise sold surprisingly well, with the lunchbox becoming a collector's item worth over $2,000 today. The Potamus Show, 1964. Purple hippos weren't exactly common cartoon protagonists, but Potamus made it work. This oversized adventurer traveled through time in his hot air balloon ship called the Minuscule, using his signature Hippo Hurricane Holler to blow away enemies while exploring different historical periods with his monkey sidekick So-So. The most insane aspect was Peter's inexplicable ability to breathe out hurricane-force winds that could demolish entire buildings, sink pirate ships, or blow over charging armies, with absolutely no explanation of how a hippo acquired this superpower. In one particularly bizarre episode, Peter's hurricane breath accidentally altered the course of the American Revolution, forcing him to fix history before returning to the present. Production documents revealed that Peter was originally conceived as an elephant explorer named Trumpet Trunk, who would use his trunk to blow away enemies. When executives worried this was too similar to existing characters, they switched to a hippo but kept the powerful breath gimmick, despite it making no biological sense for the new animal. Critics were divided on the show's time travel premise. Science fiction author Isaac Asimov, reviewing children's shows for TV Guide, called it gleefully ahistorical nonsense that might actually discourage children from learning real history. Nevertheless, Potamus maintained enough popularity to appear in various Hanna-Barbera productions for decades after his show ended. In fact, his Hurricane Holler inspired similar abilities in later characters like Breath of the Wild's Rivali. Did you ever try to imitate Peter's impossible hippo hurricane breath as a kid? Shazzan, 1967. 2 ordinary teenagers find halves of a magical ring, say the word Shazzan, and summon an all-powerful 60-foot genie who helps them navigate a fantasy Arabian world. Sounds normal, right? This fever dream of a cartoon followed Chuck and Nancy as they sought to find their way home, aided by Shazzan, who could literally do anything with his unlimited magical powers. The most mind-boggling aspect was Shazzan's inconsistent omnipotence. He could transform mountains into castles, turn villains into frogs, or create entire armies from thin air, yet somehow couldn't just send the kids home. Each episode featured the same plot. Kids get in trouble, call Shazzan, he easily defeats whatever threat exists, but still can't solve their actual problem of getting back to America. Creator Alex Toth later revealed the show's bizarre premise came from network demands for something magical but not scary, powerful but friendly, and exotic but relatable. The animation studio accidentally created 2 completely different designs for Shazzan, resulting in him inconsistently changing appearance between scenes, sometimes blue, sometimes purple, sometimes with a beard, sometimes without. Critics were baffled by the show's internal logic. Television critic Cleveland Amory famously wrote, Shazzan asks children to believe in an all-powerful being who can do literally anything except the one thing the plot requires. Despite these criticisms, the show's vibrant animation and fantasy elements made it popular with kids, though it was canceled after 36 episodes when Hanna-Barbera shifted toward more grounded concepts. Have you ever wondered why Shazzan didn't just send those poor kids home in the first episode? The Banana Splits Adventure Hour, 1968. Before Five Nights at Freddy's made animal animatronics terrifying, the Banana Splits were freaking out an entire generation of kids. This psychedelic live-action animation hybrid featured 4 costumed characters: Fleagle, a dog; Bingo, a gorilla; Drooper, a lion; and Snorky, an elephant, who played in a rock band and introduced cartoon segments between their own bizarre skits. The most disturbing element was the uncanny valley of the costumes themselves, human performers in bulky animal suits with mechanical mouths that moved out of sync with the dialogue. Children reportedly had nightmares about the characters, particularly Drooper, whose droopy eyes and slow speech pattern one child psychologist described as unintentionally mimicking drug impairment. The show's theme song, Tra-La-La, became an unlikely hit, reaching number 96 on the Billboard charts. Behind the scenes, the production was chaotic. The performers inside the hot, heavy costumes frequently passed out during filming, leading to scenes where characters would suddenly disappear mid-sketch. Sid and Marty Krofft, who designed the costumes, later admitted they were rushed and unfinished. The mechanical parts kept breaking. Sometimes we'd just have someone off-camera pulling strings to make the mouths move. Critics were divided on the show's wild aesthetic. Variety called it a psychedelic nightmare disguised as children's entertainment, while others praised its innovative format. Though popular with kids, the show lasted only 2 seasons before being canceled due to high production costs and declining ratings. Decades later, the characters received an unlikely revival in a 2019 horror film that played on the inherent creepiness of the original costumes. Did you find these characters fun or frightening as a child? There you have it, 20 forgotten cartoon failures that barely made it through a single season before vanishing into TV history. Which of these weird wonders do you remember watching? Or maybe your parents banned them from the house. The 1960s truly was animation's experimental era, where networks would greenlight absolutely anything, no matter how bizarre. Would today's focus-grouped, market-tested cartoons ever take risks like Shazzan or The Mighty Heroes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into animation's strangest creations.